really privileged, really happy to welcome Tracy and Paul, because they have so much experience between themselves about building strategies, influencing structures, influencing those cultures, about creating inclusive environments and cultures. And obviously, they're both very well-known leaders in the sector. So I wanted to have the opportunity really to just kind of get their thoughts on some of those aspects that really influence the experience the supporter gets, and sharing some of their experiences. So thank you again, and I'm going to start with a question, and I'm going to go through those areas in order. So we have heard about that collaborative approach to setting strategy from Jess and Macmillan. I wonder if you could share from your experiences where sort of different approaches to setting strategy or different strategies have either helped or hindered the experience that your supporters have received.
Ladies first, isn't it, Paul?
I was just about to say, Tracy, in a non-gendered way, I'm going to defer to you, as I do always in life anyway. So over to you, Tracy.
Nice to see you, and nice to see everyone else. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, it's been a fascinating afternoon, and a privilege to be here. And Richard, thanks for your intro there. That's a little bit daunting. I'm quite long in the tooth, and yeah, I've been around a few different charities, but I think over the years, and I think you experience different approaches, and things evolve, and things become a bit of a theme over time, and then drift away, and new thinking comes through. And I think reflecting on that, I think my first reflection around collaboration is it's hard. Whatever charities have done to try and address that, there are a number of different aspects, and Joe and Jess both referred to some of those as to why, but it is something that the organisations always seem to grapple with, and can get better at over time. But and I think having shared objectives, that's been referred to today in a number of different ways, like being focused on the same big question, or however you position it, is kind of key to bringing the right people together around the table. And that expression of bringing the right experts together around the table, was even referred to by Sarah and Lucy just now. But for me, I think the key has always lay in trying to look at an organisation from the outside in. So trying to take the perspective of your audiences on what your organisation does and is trying to achieve. So ignoring those internal structures, and getting people to think across different teams towards the achievement of a particular aspect of why or how you're trying to engage an organisation. So I suppose I would have two things to say in relation to strategy, and one is kind of thinking around top-down approach, and the other is a bottom-up approach. So from top-down, it does help to set objectives for the organisation, but for me that needs to be set. I'm going to use a phrase, like a marketing phrase, but across the customer funnel, essentially. So for ourselves as fundraisers or marketeers, setting business objectives that work across awareness, consideration, conversion, loyalty, for example, helps to bring people together around the achievement of what's the impact that individual or that team is trying to have, rather than having a more siloed approach. And it's not, even that isn't easy, and it's particularly not easy when you start. It takes a long time to get everybody aligned. And my experience of that is if you can start with fundraising and marketing even, and gradually invite others to the table, then you can build momentum. And so for us at RSPCA, that's meant trying to understand what we most need people to know and understand about animal welfare and the role of the RSPCA. And our objective around conversion is how can people have the greatest impact on animal welfare, and what do we most need people to do in conjunction with what do people are most interested in doing. And then for building loyalty, what's most important in terms of maximizing that engagement, and how do we make people feel? So it's kind of the know, do and feel. So that's the kind of top down. But I said I got a second one because I don't know whether you call this a strategy or not, but when I think about customer experience, which isn't given the profile in charities as it is in the commercial organisations. Customer experience doesn't have a place at the top table in the same way in a cause as it does have in the retail sector, for example. When we think about our loved favourite brands like John Lewis or Apple, customer experience for them is number one. It's incredibly important. It's just not, you just don't see that in a lot of charities, and it's quite hard to get people to coalesce around that, to get that collaboration, that integration towards building good customer experience. And so the strategy, if you could call it that, has been one of stealth, really. It's just start the conversation and you keep having that conversation with lots of different parts of the organization until it starts to have some traction. You start to find the people that want to have the conversation with you, and you start to bring people with you and build and grow from there. So in actual fact, I've found that a better strategy, if you like, than trying to say, okay, what's our big objective for customer experience, and how are we going to deliver that? So yeah, very kind of two different approaches there, but for different reasons.
That's I really like that, Tracy. Thank you. I just wanted to. I was thinking, obviously, as you were saying, that lots of charities that don't have, the customer experience at the top table. And my first thought, I was going to speak to. There's one of my favourite job titles, and Natasha, she's here. She's like the most excellent customer experience manager at Diabetes UK. One of the best job titles ever. But I think, Paul, yours comes a very, very close second. And is it not the equivalent of customer experience at the top table?
Great to be here. I'm really sorry, actually, that unlike Tracy, I've not had the opportunity to experience all of the other debates. I've come, actually, ironically, from trying to ensure that we are delivering a great supporter experience. But picking up on what Tracy was saying, and as a direct response to your question, Richard, yeah, no, absolutely. It's actually really interesting the amount of feedback I get on on my job title, and it very much absolutely speaks about the intentional decision that we made prior to my joining British Red Cross, where we wanted to move away from what has always historically felt like a very transactional approach to engaging with our supporters. That's something that absolutely plays the supporter experience at the heart of how we were going to engage with those who share our values, and very much exactly as Tracy has kind of referred to, with a view to deepening engagement, improving loyalty, and actually just making sure that anybody that was engaging with the British Red Cross really, truly, and genuinely, feels part of the, of our community, of our movement, understands what they're going to get from us, and knows that we're listening to them as well. So yes, that's the thinking behind my post. And that speaks, of course, to a broader strategy. And I've had it is nothing but a privilege to be part of this organisation. I've had that privilege for around 5 years. And actually, one of the very first things that we did, and it's when you look back, you start thinking, okay, what are the great calls that that are made? And one of them was creating a supporter experience team, and with leadership that was at the top table of our marketing and fundraising directorate. And we have been, it's been a very, very positive story thereafter. And interestingly, we've taken both approaches that Tracy kind of articulated. So we've done the stealth thing, but we've also been, but we've and had really, really interesting and slightly unexpected conversations accordingly. But I think one of the things that and I'm really thrilled. I think that that Emily, who leads our amazing work in this space, is on the call at the moment as well. But one of the things that was really truly galvanizing for the organisation was the creation of our supporter experience North Star, which speaks very much to our values. It's needs driven as well, in terms of us responding directly to the needs of our supporters. And what it enabled us to do is really give ourselves a point of focus going forward, a set of principles by which we could execute against that, and provide real clarity to the organisation about what we mean by a truly impactful and meaningful supporter experience. I still think I agree wholeheartedly with Tracy that the sector is almost certainly behind, other sectors in taking it seriously. But for us, as an organisation, we continue to see great results.
Brilliant. So there were 3 other themes that we covered. There was one around that Joe Jenkins talked around structure and how different structures can and there were some very, very different operating models there, from quite industrial, I guess, all the way through to really quite radical. And I wondered, how you've worked with structure or despite structure to really help deliver amazing supporter experiences.
I mean, Tracy, shall I lead off on that one? So I was interested by the way that you framed it, and indeed the title of Joe's or the subtitle of Joe's talk in terms of with or despite structure, because I think that really resonates. And knowing Joe, it would have been an incredibly thoughtful as well as enjoyable presentation. I mean, I think for us, as I said in my previous answer, we made against a degree of organisational cynicism, I say, not resistance, but just cynicism. We made the decision that we were going to create a dedicated and bespoke team that was solely about driving an enhanced supporter experience. We did that within the context of I'm trying to kind of find a polite way of saying it. Our supporters weren't particularly complimentary about the supporter experience that they were receiving. I think, even in terms of the About loyalty benchmarks that we were receiving, they definitely weren't where we wanted them to be. So we wanted to kind of respond, in a way that was completely proportionate. So we devised a strategy. We created a team that was situated at the heart of the business. And as I say, we've got good results from that. I think if Emily was here, what she would and was able to speak, and maybe she'll kind of join in via the chat, is that in effect what we've ended up with and what we're evolving to is a bit of a hub and spoke model. I don't know whether that's an acknowledgement that we've still got structural challenges or not. But what we have found is that it's absolutely brilliant having a central team, having a structure that enables a central team to establish the principles and to monitor good practice, and what have you. But the evolution is then about ensuring that gets pick up and traction in all of the other income streams. So, I know I just caught the back end of a presentation on legacies. So, what we are now seeking to do is to absolutely amplify what's happening centrally with our individual income streams and to make sure that there's consistency of practice and the application of principles in that regard. So I guess as we move forward, on our journey, what we're saying to ourselves is that what suits us best, and of course it will be potentially different for every organisation, is having the kind of beating heart, which is our central team, but ensuring that then we've got best practice embedded and capability and capacity in other bits of the business. I think one of the credit I would attribute to Emily and her team's work is that we're doing a brilliant job, as I say, at the centre. And now what we're finding out over time is that the respective income streams are now really beginning to anticipate and proactively talk about how they can really, make live an impactful supporter experience. But I'm always asking myself, okay, so what could we do if we had more capability as well? So yeah, hopefully that answers the question, Richard.
No, that's brilliant, Paul. And I hope you don't mind me sharing that actually you're one of the few charities who continue to grow their loyalty as well when we've been working with you over those years. So I think something around that, the way that you just described that and articulated that, something is clearly right, if that's right. If there's there's not right and wrong, you know what I mean, but it's working. That's what I mean, it's working. Yeah, Tracy, I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess my experience of it is working with structures and also working despite our structures, I guess I'd put it. And RSPCA has a pretty traditional model, but I think because we are clear that we have sort of shared objectives for customer experience, and those I mentioned earlier about, start with the fundraising marketing teams, get them working together, and then invite others to the table. And and so that story about the importance of customer experience and those conversations that we're starting to have from that central place are landing in different parts of the organization. And by that, I mean in the broadest sense. And that's my ambition with customer experience, is because, when people, we are trying to get to a 1 RSPCA. We've got a national society. We've got 140 odd branches that are independent organisations. We've got RSPCA Assured Food Accreditation Scheme, which is separate again. And yet I want people to have one experience of the RSPCA, and in the same way as you set expectations around, if you go into your favourite store, we need to be able to do that with RSPCA. Any touch point, what sort of experience you can get. You set yourselves a standard for that, and we're a long way away from that at the moment. So we kind of started small in bringing in a lead role for customer experience, Laura, who's fantastic, and I think she still loves us, but we've literally pointed her at every single part of the organisation, which is an immense task for one person. But what she's managed to do then is to seed that idea that customer experience is important, and actually importantly can then help those parts of the organisation to achieve what they're trying to achieve. So that's completely ignoring structures and saying to people that have that skills or knowledge and expertise, go forth and don't see structures as a barrier. Okay, you sit within a directorate, but your remit is to think about the customer and get the organisation to think about the customer. So make it your business. So I think that's helped us to make a start. And I think both where I am now and previous organisation, Prostate Cancer UK, the key was in not being too ambitious or setting your expectations too high from early on, because it's not easy. It's not something you turn around overnight. So you have to invest for a while before you start to see the results of what you're doing. And to start small and just keep going with it and keep building on what you're doing. And I think where it goes wrong is where there's a tension between a team's objectives and a broader objective like customer experience, if you like. So people get sucked back into, they have to focus on their day-to-day, not on that other big question. And that what can
people do about that? When I think that's a really great observation, that there's that kind of when it doesn't work, those are the difficulties. And they're often everybody's everyday realities, aren't they? It's like, do I do my day job or do I deliver that experience? And I know sometimes it's the same thing. Oh no, great, see Paul.
I was going to come in and say that notionally or arguably they are the same thing, because well, certainly that would be the mantra that I would hope that we would chant in our organisation. But the tension that Tracy describes is real. There's no two ways about it.
So so what can we do?
How do you overcome it? I mean, I think basically if you've got leadership within the organisation who is valuing it, it goes right back to the beginning of the day, really, that sees the need to answer some of those bigger questions and understands what those big questions are, and then can coalesce people around facing into that question, regardless of which part of the organisation is, because this is where structure becomes irrelevant. Who are the people best placed to answer that question, and making sure you get a good mix and diversity of people within that, then you're in a good place. But that, of course, does require some leadership, because it requires those people to be allowed to focus in on delivering that, rather than specifically the team's objectives. So I think that's one way. Another way is by setting those business objectives for customer experience, for example. We focus on that, and again, regardless of whether people are in the same team or not, that in itself becomes a piece of work.
Paul, you raised your hand. Were you?
I did. It was I hope a build on what Tracy said. I mean, looking at the programme, it's clear that you've had an amazing day. If there'd been a section or an element that I would have been really paying attention to, it would have been the structure piece. primarily because, and I don't know whether this is Chatham House rules, and obviously Emily's on the call as well, but we're reorganising ourselves as a directorate at the moment, and going through that exercise, it really does kind of force you into asking yourself, what's getting in the way of success? Is it structure? Is it culture? Or is that other things? And what this particular round of kind of reorganising has taught me, or reinforced to me, is that I think sometimes organisations, I don't know quite, or we as personalities hide behind structure. And actually, it can be, or is much more likely to be, about ways of working, mindset, culture, and what have you. And so I would have loved to have seen what emerged from that particular section of the conversation. Structure doesn't necessarily have to be an impediment to effective ways of working. I guess that's the point that I wanted to make.
Oh,
and it certainly doesn't have to be an impediment to driving a really, really impactful and powerful supporter experience.
Thank you. I wanted to shift sort of, I guess, across the way and think about diversity, equity and inclusion. So Aisha Sadiq talked to us about some of the barriers, some of the traits of an inclusive organisation. I wondered if you could share where you feel your organisations are on that journey, and what more you're doing to become more inclusive as organisations.
Shall I kick off with this
Yes.
one? Where are we? I was asking myself that when I could see the poll going up. We are early days with this, but we've made a start, and we've made a really good start, I would say. So in that, we have given it a greatest importance in the organisation, and we've done a really good piece of work in trying to understand what's important to people, our colleagues, to determine what the priorities are, and then put some structure around that. So we've also put some resource into it, as in we have a lead person who has a huge amount of experience and has a remit to kind of make themselves very visible in the organisation and have those conversations. So we're now, I guess, in doing the do rather than the thinking. So we're through the thinking stage and we're in the doing stage. We're yet to see what the impact of that is, I think. But I think there's different elements of it that we're starting to feel are changing, as in just that, we talk a bit more about psychological safety and people able to be themselves at work, and what it means for people to feel inclusive. So the conversation is there and the understanding is building. And I think that's really important. We've said it's important to us. We're trying, and we're being authentic in the way that we're doing that. And I think from an external point of view, we've also thought a lot about what does this mean for our audiences, in an authentic way, as in it's not a badge that we wear. We want to understand what animal welfare means to different communities and what their relationship with animals is. So what does that mean in terms of how we engage them? And how do we do that in a way and represent that, show that back to those communities, to show them that actually this is for everybody. Animal welfare is everyone's welfare, and that is our mantra. So we've got to find a way of understanding what that means, for each one of you, even listening in now, when I say those words. Why is it important to you, and how do we tap into that?
Paul, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I would say really, really briefly that British Red Cross as an organisation has lent in significantly into the EDI agenda, but we've got so much further to go. There's a bit of a uniqueness. I'm sure every organisation could say this to our stance of all matters EDI, but really briefly, I mean, we're an organisation that is steeped in colonialist thought. It's in our origin. It's in our delivery model. In as much as in terms of how we work overseas or whatever, or it could be inferred to be in our delivery model. And so that kind of brings with it all sorts of associations around power dynamics, how we live with and address white savior complex, and and what have you. I would say that for us, George Floyd was catalytic. It definitely led to us really, like many organisations, like many parts of society, really kind of taking a step back and doing that really hard evaluation, as a result of which we stepped up resources significantly in that regard. We have an executive lead, which happens to be me on that, but we've now got a central team which is grown in size by over 500%. We've got all sorts of kind of programs that we have launched. We are now dissecting the results of our and sorry, I should also say that it's led to some really imaginative recruitment processes. So in particular, within the marketing and fundraising directorate, the majority of posts now, or for a number of posts, we send out the interview questions ahead of time to better engage applicants who might be divergent or what have you, diverse, I should say. So yeah, so those are the types. So that's the type of creativity that it's leaning into the EDI agenda has kind of brought us to. We also begun to much more regularly take the temperature of colleagues now. So, we have 2 annual staff surveys, but our last one, which is the one that I was referring to that we're dissecting, has an EDI focus. But it's telling us some harsh truths, which are, ultimately, as I said at the beginning, we've got a long way to go. And I really did like Tracy's point about thinking about, being thoughtful about how this reflects in the conversations that we're having with our supporters as well, because we don't want it to be performative. It has to be really, really genuine and authentic.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you. So what I wanted to do was to invite, I know we've still got a theme to cover, but we are, I've been absolutely thrilled with the areas, the topics we've covered so far. But I was wondering if we could invite Joe and Lucy to join us to cover the last topic, which was around leadership. And have so this was around Shahida's presentation around kind leadership. I wondered if Joe and Lucy are able to join us. It's great because Shahida talked about her own sort of personal experiences of leadership, her own journey through leadership, and there were loads and loads of comments in the chat about leadership, different perceptions of leadership, that nice leaders can't be strong, and people were questioning their career decisions about it. It seems to be such a big topic, and a bit of discussion around how organisations are investing in that. And welcome back, Joe. And Joe, I'm sure you know Tracy and Paul. I'm sure you've all have you all met before? Have you met? Of course you have.
Yeah, to put it mildly, yes.
We're not strangers. We're not strangers.
I wondered if we could maybe just have a last chat around leadership, and actually not necessarily leadership as a kind of a principle, but leadership in terms of how can leadership influence the experience that your supporters have, and what are the different styles of leadership, and so one of the things that we heard this morning actually at our members workshop was that leadership isn't just about a seniority thing. Leadership doesn't just come from, as with your structure, Joe, it's not like a top-down, bottom-up type thing. And to your, Tracy, to your strategy approach, there's different places to that. What is leadership from your perspective? How do different approaches really influence deliver an amazing supporter experience?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that bit of the. I mean, it's been a really interesting afternoon. But I was really struck by the comments that were triggered by that as well. And some of what it made me reflect on was both, I think, the points around being kind and whether that's a weakness or not. And I think one of the things I've reflected on in recent years is how you distinguish between kindness and niceness. And I think sometimes we can be nice, and that doesn't always result in us being kind, because actually we need to have courageous conversations with each other in order to be able to support each other to do the best for the causes that we care about. And I think that we're seeing more and more that in the context that we operate in, where the world around us is constantly changing and the needs of our supporters are constantly changing, that we really need empowering, kind leaders to create the environment in which the people around us are able to be able to respond to that environment. And the kind of old model, and I guess, when I was talking a bit about structure, I was talking about how we've tried to move on from that kind of old top-down kind of bureaucratic kind of model, and that implies a type of leadership where leaders are the grand chess masters who know all the answers, move all the pieces around, and our job is to tell people what to do, and then they follow our orders. And that just doesn't cut it in the world that we're living in. Firstly, I don't know about Tracy and Paul, but I definitely don't know all the answers, and the questions are constantly changing. But what I do know is that I've got amazing, talented people around me who have brilliant answers. They just need to be freed up to be able to respond to what's going on in our supporters' lives, in our case, young people's lives, and to do so in a way that is more than the sum of our parts. And so I think that's such an important dimension of leadership today, is to create a supportive, collaborative environment where people are clear about what our overall direction of travel is, and then empower people to be able to directly respond to what's going on in the environment around them. And I think when we look through the lens of supporter experience, the people that are speaking to our supporters day in, day out are by far the best placed to know what the best conversation is and what will add the most value to those supporters. So my job is to make sure that they're empowered to have those conversations and to add that value, and not to have to go back through 20 sign-offs to be able to support people. So yeah, I think that's kind of what stood out and why I think it's so important. I think it's good as an ethical framework, but also I think it's kind of mission critical if we're going to be able to keep pace with a very rapidly evolving world around us.
Thank you, Joe. I know, Tracy, Paul, do you have any reflections on? Actually, I'd like to go to Paul first, because you said you wanted to see the structure piece.
Relish the opportunity to question Joe, basically, primarily, because I learned a lot. I mean, but I learned a lot. What I haven't got a sense of, because I didn't have the opportunity to listen to your earlier presentation. How far along would you say you are in your supporter experience journey, Joe? I mean, are you? I mean, there's presumably that there's further steps that you want to go to in terms of embedding and what have you. And then I guess there's another bonus question, Richard, if that's all right. Or maybe it's not a question, it's a reflection. I've always regarded you as both a nice and a kind leader, basically. So I think it's space that you can occupy simultaneously.
I wouldn't disagree, and actually, not that I'm nice and kind, but that you can be both. There was something that there's a great podcast called Fixable. If you haven't come across it, I really recommend it. It's great. You get these two absolutely fantastic, inspiring leaders who, in each episode, answer real life problems that leaders, managers, members of teams are struggling with, and they break it down and they talk it through. So it's worth checking out. And they did one recently where they talked about having high care and high standards, and that often in leaders and managers you tend to bias one over the other. So you might be really obsessed about how do we achieve performance and smash our targets, and you can lose sight of the person and the role of tending to your people. But you can also go the other way, and you can be so focused on care that you lose sight of how you're actually there to also empower people to do their best work. And I think that is also that blend of kindness, niceness. It's about enabling people to do the best work that they possibly can for the causes that they care about, and then that doesn't lose sight of standards. I think that's really, really important. I would say on the journey that we're on at the Children's Society, I think we have I don't think there's an endpoint to journeys like this, is there? So I think what we have done is reset the way we think around supporters and reset the way in which we think about the role of a charity in achieving change. And I think that fundamental mindset is the critical foundation for everything that we need to do that follows. So understanding that not just in a theoretical sense we can't do it on our own, but in an actual sense the charity is just one part of what the Children's Society is. We are volunteers and supporters. We are the young people that we stand alongside that, and so us understanding that as an organization, so that we understand our role in relation to our supporters and our partners and allies is fundamental to that. And we've done a lot to then look at our processes and our ways of working, but that's something that feels like that, yeah, it's a never-ending job. So I'm pleased with the progress, but I also can see a long road ahead in terms of where we might get to.
Yeah, thank you both. Tracy, thank you. What are your thoughts on everything that Joe and Paul have shared there?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about kindness, my immediate thought is, well, what does kindness mean to different people? And I wonder whether, relating back to the diversity question, maybe, does it mean different things to different people in terms of what they need and want from a leader? So for some people will enjoy more structure and more, be really clear about what their objective is, and some really clear sort of maybe instruction around that. And for other people, it will be give me the framework and let me go, let me go. And so then, people's perception of how kind their leaders are to them probably differ. But I mean, I don't know whether this is a controversial thing to say or not, but one of my reflections over the years is that it's the more confident leaders that lean more into their kindness. And I don't know whether that's because they're more relaxed about the fact that they can create that framework for their teams and trust their teams then to deliver against it, and have the experience to go on to do that, or something else. I don't know. It'd be an interesting sort of debate to hear back from people as to whether they've experienced that themselves. But there is a big question of trust in here. Kindness makes me think about trust as well, and the degree to which leaders trust their teams. And something Joe said made me think about that as well, that if you're able to if you're able to kind of to set the direction of travel or create that framework, and then step back and be supportive in terms of whether your team succeeds or fails, you support them in that because they've understood the direction of travel and the impact that we're trying to have as an organization, and they're doing their best to do that and achieve that. And then maybe kindness in that situation is about supporting them regardless of what then becomes of that, and make sure that you're making best out of whether that goes right or goes wrong. So it's a really interesting discussion, I think. But like I say, my first thought is, what does that mean for the recipients of that kindness, or what does kindness mean to them? And kindness is at the heart of the RSPCA because it's so integral to how we need people to think about their animals in order to create good animal welfare. And so it's right at the heart of us trying to understand what kindness means, and also how you encourage people, how you tease that kindness out of people.
Thank you, Tracy. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to just open the floor because this is a great opportunity for anybody who we've got here, any of our viewers, to ask Tracy, Paul, and or Joe a question, or any of the above. So please do, if there's anything you'd like to know, just pop it in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll pick that up. But while we're waiting for you to have a kind of a muse on those questions, I'll just we've got one already. Got one already, I think, here. No, it's not. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So yeah, no, I was going to ask, if, in terms of thinking about these sort of structural bits, if you see what I mean, they're like the cultural parts: your strategy, your structure, your vision, your leadership, your diversity, your inclusion, all those aspects that kind of sits in the foundations. What's the kind of the most pressing thing that you're working on within your charities at the moment? Those kind of enablers.
Sorry, Richard, before we explore that, there was a question in which BRC was name checked from the floor.
Okay.
I think it's quite a powerful question. So I just simply wanted to say that
please, can you read the question?
Yeah, so the question is basically it was asking whether at BRC does our people team kind of engage with our supporter experience team around mapping the employee experience, because the questioner was making the point, and I think it's incredibly valid, that EDI and employee experience are intrinsically linked, and the need to understand the moments that matter for employees across different social groups absolutely will then help frame how the organisation goes forward. I think that's a really powerful and insightful question, and I don't want to take up any more time simply by saying that when I talked about the long road ahead that the BRC has, that's a perfect illustration of the type of progress that we need to be made. We know that from an EDI context, but we're not getting those those key moments right, or that we can improve off them, and we need to improve them. And we need to do that, in a way that is systematic and recordable and measurable and what have you. And so that's a logical next step for us. So I just wanted to leap in on that one, Richard, because I think it was such an insightful question.
No, that's really key. So it's that where I guess the intersection of EDI with employee experience and customer experience is where all those things come together at those key moments. Yeah. That's it is. You're right. That's a really insightful point. Thank you to the question. Really appreciate that. And to you, Paul, for picking that up. So if I can just go back to my other question, unless there are more from the floor, which I'm sure there could be. But yeah, what are the other big challenges in terms of those enabling issues at your organisations, and what are you doing about them? How are you moving forwards?
Okay. I suppose what I was just reflecting on is I suppose I'd describe it as how are we is about relevance and how we connect with the whole of people. So I'll try and say what I mean by that. But one of the things that's kind of in the DNA of the Children's Society is that we see the whole young person. So we see a child for all that they are and all that they can be. We don't see them by their sort of presenting challenges or struggles that are going on in their life. We see a whole human being, and our desire is to kind of connect with that person and go on a long-term journey built on trust that enables that young person to thrive and be all that they want to be. And that's a continual challenge for us about how do we make sure that that's what we're connecting with when we're engaging with children and young people. And I think that is the same challenge we need to connect with both our supporters and our staff as well. It's around how do we really connect with all that people are, all that they can bring, all that is relevant in their lives, and harness that in a way that is valuable to everybody, and obviously is harnessing towards the impact we're trying to achieve for our mission. And I think for me, that's the intersection of us thinking about our people experience, thinking about our supporter experience, and thinking about our young people experience. And everything else are just means to try, whether it's what structures or processes or systems we're using. It's really about trying to connect with people and build authentic relationships that are relevant to what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Paul and or Tracy, your kind of final thoughts on the big things.
For our RSPCA, so we're it's like a lot of things we talked about today. Really, we're a long way from it being the way we need and want it to be yet, but we're definitely on the road to getting there, which is the important thing, and we're making really good progress as well, and so much brilliant stuff has been done at the RSPCA over the last couple of years. It's quite unbelievable. But understanding how people can have an impact on animal welfare, it's a similar challenge, as Joe's just articulated there. It's that societal impact. It's a RSPCA would describe itself like a lot of big organizations do, as a big and complex organization. So we feel complicated, whether we are or not, we feel complicated. And when we try to create that sense of one RSPCA to the outside world, then that feels difficult to simplify. And yet we need to simplify if we're going to bring that understanding to the public about what the issues are around animal welfare and how they can engage in that. So it's the scale of that, I think, and the fact that each charity, majority of charities have a broad range of different things that they do, but you have to find the aspects of your work that are going to engage the most, that are going to have the greatest impact. That's a difficult question.
Okay, yeah, such a lot wrapped up in there, Tracy. And Paul, a final thought from you?
Yeah, well, I'll keep it short. I mean, two things from me. The first is to completely echo Tracy and Joe's point about sometimes the complexity of our organisations getting in the way of being able to tell stories about, relatable stories about impact and the difference, that we are making, basically. And that's sometimes compounded, certainly within BRC, with challenges around, systematic impact reporting, capturing data, and what have you. So, but I'm also conscious that there's a wide variety of organisations on this call, and I would say that another challenge for us, though, is knowing our supporters and getting real insight into them, and committing the resources to make that happen, so that you are generating a phrase that Joe always used to kind of remind me of, the importance of actionable insight. But I think that all of our organisations potentially, that can be something that we lean into even more rigorously and systematically than we currently are doing, I would say. So for us, but that is an ongoing conversation that we're having. How can we find out more about our supporters, what motivates them, what drives them, in a way that means that we can be even more bespoke and tailored in the way that we're engaging.
That's been a really, really useful, interesting and thought-provoking discussion. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Paul. We've gone from huge areas like strategy to structure, to diversity, inclusivity, and then Paul's just brought it right back to the supporter and understanding our supporters, which of course is absolutely core to, I guess, everything that we're really working about here. Yes, to Joe's point, it is about for the Children's Society, the young people and the staff and the supporters, but here we're really focusing on what is it about our supporters and who they are. So thank you again, big thank you. And I know we'll have big rounds of applauses from everybody here. Thank you for your time, to Tracy, to Paul, and to Joe for joining us here this afternoon and really helping move along the discussion, moving along the debate. And I know that people here will have taken away a huge amount of value, lots of pointers in terms of how they can make the changes they can to improve their supporters' experience. So thank you all very, very much indeed. I would now like to invite Roger to come back and do some closing comments and some takeouts from this afternoon. And as just a quick note before, don't forget we've got the QR code there. If you've got any questions for Tracy, Paul, Joe, anybody else that you've seen here today, or just thoughts that come to mind, something you'd like to know more about, just scan the code, drop us a line, and we'll either set up a meeting, put you in touch with the right people, but we'll carry on the conversation because it's really important. So thank you again to Paul, Tracy, and Joe. And now I'll hand over to Roger. Over to you.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Richard. I've been blown away by this afternoon. I really have. I hope everyone on the webinar has as well. I think what we've heard is just a couple of things. One, it's really reinforced the importance of the subjects that we've been covering this afternoon, and the quality of people. It's just been inspiring to hear. We've talked about big topics there. I'm just going to add one thing to this, and that's that I think when we talk about big topics, it's very easy to think about how far we've got to go and be worried about how far we've got to go. But I just wanted to pick up on one thing that ended up in the chat as just a reminder. We also need to celebrate successes and on the journey that we take. And it was Emily, who works with Paul, that was put in the chat about her culture shifting to the extent. So she's in a supporter experience team, and she said talking about being in a meeting and ideas coming from people from outside the organization, outside of that team, and that they don't need to be in the room for that to happen. And I think that's just a real indication of success, isn't it? When some of these concepts get the right way, that's when it's really ingrained in the culture of an organization. So yeah, I really want to add my thanks as well to everyone today. It's been inspiring. It's an indicator of success. That's it, isn't it? That it's really ingrained in the culture, that the ideas are coming from different places. I just want to draw today to get to an end, and really sort of draw out three things to finish with. One is I want to set a bit of a challenge for everyone on this call to take away today. The second is I've got a bit of a starting point. If you're thinking, gosh, where do I start? There's an idea. It's not necessarily the right one for you, but it's an idea. And I'm going to finish with an offer to all of you as well. So back to where we started today, that there isn't a single person in your organisation who isn't in some way responsible for growing supporter loyalty. No one works in a perfect charity, but what this means is we all have huge amounts of responsibility to make things right. It's incumbent. It sits with us. And this is the summary page that Paul that Richard showed earlier of what we summarised today. There, I just want to think about that concept of leadership. And we mentioned that this morning we had a workshop with Chase Index members, and it was great. And we were talking about some of this. And someone made the comment that leadership is different from seniority. We all have a role to play. We can all lead. And actually, we all have a responsibility to be change agents within our organisations. And that's my challenge for you as a starting point here. I'd like to throw out that challenge that everyone on this call can be a change agent in their organisation, that you can be someone that can create change. You can lead. You don't have to have that seniority. You don't have to have a line in your job title. You can lead. And actually, it's incumbent on you and all of us to do that. So please take this away. You be an agent of change for your organisation. So that's the starting point of the first of the three sort of things I wanted to just sort of draw to a close here. That challenge for you to think about, actually, yes, I can lead, I can create that change. Okay, what does that change entail? Well, there's a lot of different things coming in, but if we really want to be supporter focused, I'm going to start with the line that Paul almost pretty much finished with here, about the supporter insight and bringing the supporter knowledge and insight into the team. I love the phrase that some people have, they call the insight team the voice of the customer team, or the voice of the supporter team. I love that, because it really is about hearing people's voices and bringing people in. Supporters are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are real people with real issues and real challenges and real needs, desires, real motivations as well. So in terms that as a sort of starting point, that's one of the areas I would be really looking at, and bringing that insight in organization and sharing it within your organization. And I think there's three questions that I would be thinking about asking within that. The first of them is that question why. Again, Paul just mentioned that. Why do your supporters give? Why do they volunteer? Why do they campaign for you? Some of you will be familiar with Simon Sinek, who approaches this from a leadership perspective, and inspiring people is about understanding their motivations. It's if you're not familiar, look him up. YouTube, TED Talks, brilliant, a brilliant speaker on the subject. But really thinking about the question of why. We need to understand that for our supporters, the unique things that make people support. Why does one person support an environmental charity and another an animal welfare charity and another a humanitarian charity or a children's charity? What are the differences there? And what are the differences within our supporters? And that unique mix that really leads every individual to have different reasons of their personal experience, identity, values, attitudes, things that are important to them, their hopes, their fears, their faith in some cases, really understanding why they support. About loyalty, and those of you who work with us will be very familiar with this. We talk about this as commitment. That commitment, what is it that creates someone commitment to a cause and to a charity? Why do they do that? The second question, I think, is just critically important in all this, that we need to bring into our organisation, bring the understanding of this into our organisation, is what do we need to do? How do we need to communicate with people to make them feel valued? To really, I mean, we talk about donor satisfaction. That's what we refer to it as. But what are the things that really make we need to understand in terms of the actual relationship? Some people want lots of recognition, lots of thanking. Others, perhaps majority, just need a little bit more quiet and know that they're appreciated. Some want information and knowledge. Others want stories and the emotional case studies. Some care about one issue. Some care about different issues. We call this satisfaction. It's about the way you ask, the way you communicate, the way you build those relationships with people. Don't forget, it's not for you to decide whether or not you're communicating the right way. Your supporters will be the judge of that. And that's when they're really satisfied. And the third one is about the reassurance that they're the right people for you to give your money to, for you to give your support to. We want people to really trust you with their heart and their soul and their money. Of course we do. We want them to really understand the impact that money has and believe that you will behave with integrity when you receive it and do the things that you promise to do. And that's what we call trust. When people really believe that they can give you their money, their time, their voice, and you will do the right thing with it and achieve with it. So those three questions really sit at the heart of what we think any organisation should be doing. It's what we do from a understanding supporters perspective. Why do they give? How can you communicate? How can you build trust with them? It's about a measurement of it. You need to be doing that. You need to be understanding those things. You need to be measuring where you're doing well and where you're doing less well, so that you can target your programs accordingly. And you need to create plans off the back of it and do something off the back of it. Create that change off the back of it. There's no point in doing research and measurement unless you're committed to making a difference and doing something different off the bat. So 3 things to take away today, please. The first is that challenge. Be the change agent. Be the person that leads the change in your organization if that's needed. Don't sit back and wait for someone else to do it. Do that. Start to bring some of these ideas to the fore in your charities. The second is the starting point. Bring your supporters and your supporters' voices into your charity. Make sure they're understood. Make sure they're heard. Make sure that people really understand the emotions and the life situations that your supporters have. And the third, we've had this QR code there all afternoon. And yes, it's there if you want to ask any questions of anyone that any of the sessions we've had today. But it's also there if you just want to ask us any questions at all, prompt any questions, or if you want to have a chat about anything, just love to just have a chat with you. Scan that or go to about-loyalty.com/tell me more, and we'd love to hear from you. So that's really the 3 things I wanted to leave with: that challenge, starting point, that offer, genuine offer for you. Please take us up on that if you want to. And I'm going to put out one very, very quick request for you all, and that's that we're recruiting. We have a constant passion for trying to understand why people do the things they do, and we're looking to increase our capabilities of doing research in that area and for both the sector and for individual clients. And we have an ever-growing pool of data that we just want to get better at diving into and drawing out those nuggets of insight in there, and then reporting on that back. So it's just a final plea. If you know anyone who you think may be interested, or if you are interested, please do give me a call. Details on the screen, or again, use the QR code. So I'm going to finish there. Just a final note on that. Again, a big thank you for everyone who's spoken today, but I also want to say thank you for you for attending and giving up your afternoon, and hopefully you've got something out of this that will help you build loyalty with your supporters.
Yes, thank you, Roger. And simply to echo Roger's thoughts there and reflections, I'd like to thank Jess Gillam from Macmillan for speaking, Joe Jenkins from Children's Society. I'd like to thank Aisha Sadiq from the EW Group and Shahida Aslam from Helena Kennedy Foundation. And of course, Lucy Richardson and Sarah Dalling from Barnardo's with the Legacy Case Study. And finally, Tracy Pritchard and Paul Armadi, who again joined with Joe Jenkins for that panel discussion at the end. So much content. I hope that everybody's written down reams and reams of notes. We had hundreds of people here today. Always such a pleasure to do this for you. We'll be doing the same thing again next year. So let us know. Yeah, scan the QR code. Let us know what you thought of today. Drop us a note. Tell us what you'd like to see next time round. Or if you've got any questions at all about anything, please do get in touch. And finally, of course, a big thank you to Kay and to Roger and all the crew here at About Loyalty. We're so pleased to see everybody here today. Thank you again, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your Thursdays.